My brother Owen banned me from his wedding because my job as a funeral director was too morbid for his fiance's family. He forgot my morbid, money funded his entire life, so I arrived at the rehearsal with a wedding gift that canceled his future. Before we begin today's story, we have an urgent announcement. Due to technical issues, this channel is shutting down. But don't worry, the stories continue. Please subscribe to our new channel, Daily Drip Stories. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The silence of the preparation room usually brought me peace, but tonight, the hum of the ventilation system felt like it was drilling directly into my temples. I peeled off my latex gloves with a snap that echoed off the stainless steel tables, the sound sharp and final. My hands were trembling, a tremor that had nothing to do with the delicate work I had just finished on Mrs. Higgins and everything to do with the exhaustion vibrating in my marrow. It was 3 in the morning. I had been on my feet for 14 hours, managing a double service and the sudden intake of a tragic accident victim, all while battling a migraine that felt like a railroad spike being driven behind my left eye. I walked into my small office, the scent of lilies and antiseptic clinging to my clothes, a smell I had stopped noticing a decade ago, but one that others seemed to smell on me from a mile away. I sank into the leather chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and reached for my phone. I just wanted to see a text from Owen. I wanted to see a confirmation for the rehearsal dinner time on Friday. I needed something light, something celebratory to pull me out of the shadows of the prep room. There was a missed call from him and a voicemail. I frowned, rubbing my temple. Owen never called at this hour. He knew my schedule. He knew that if I wasn't answering, I was working. A knot of anxiety, cold and hard, tightened in my stomach. Had something happened? Was there an emergency with the venue? I pressed play, holding the phone to my ear, my other hand gripping the edge of the mahogany desk so hard my knuckles turned white. "Hey, Camilla," Owen's voice came through. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't the voice of someone in a crisis. It was tight, rehearsed. It sounded like he was reading from a script. "Look, I know you're probably working late again. You're always working. Listen, we need to talk about the wedding. About Friday and Saturday." He paused. In the background, I heard a murmur, a female voice. Abigail. She was whispering something, coaching him. "Abigail's parents arrived today," Owen continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming defensive before I had even said a word. They're old-fashioned, Cammy, you know that. They come from a different world. And we were talking over dinner, and the subject of your profession came up." I stopped breathing. The air in the office felt suddenly thin. "They are extremely uncomfortable with it," he said, rushing the words now, trying to get them out before his courage failed. "Her father is superstitious. He thinks it's bad luck to have someone who touches dead bodies around the bride before the ceremony. And Abigail, she's so stressed, Cammy. She's at her breaking point. She's crying right now." Another pause, a heavy, suffocating silence. "We think it's best if you don't come," he said. The words hung there, suspended in the static. "Not to the rehearsal, and probably not to the ceremony. It's just too much drama and we need the day to be perfect. I'll come see you after the honeymoon, okay? We can do a private dinner, just us. Please understand, I love you." The line went dead. I sat there, the phone slipping from my numb fingers and clattering onto the desk. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The shock was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me gasping for air that wouldn't come. My little brother, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager whose tuition checks I had signed with cramping hands, the man whose life was built on the very morbid money he now found too embarrassing to be in the same room with. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, me and Owen at his college graduation, his arm around me, smiling that bright, expensive smile. The betrayal wasn't just in the exclusion, it was in the dismissal. It was worse than the diagnosis itself had been when Mom got sick. It was a precise, surgical excision of my existence from the highlight reel of his life. The next 24 hours were a blur of gray fog. I moved through the motions of my life like a ghost haunting my own business. I directed a service for a veteran at 10 a.m., standing in the back with my hands clasped respectfully, nodding at the grey. Evening widow, offering tissues, whispering condolences. I was the consummate professional. I was the rock everyone leaned on. But inside, I was crumbling. Every time I looked at the grieving families, I saw the loyalty they had for one another. I saw siblings holding hands, weeping together, supporting each other through the darkest moments of their lives. And then I saw Owen. I saw him sitting at a high-end restaurant with Abigail and her parents, laughing, clinking crystal glasses, while I was erased. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had heard him wrong. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe he was drunk. I called him back at noon. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, "Owen, please call me. We need to talk about this. You can't be serious." Read at 12:05 p.m. No reply. I texted again at 4:00 p.m. "I'm your sister. I raised you. You're banning me because of my job." Read at 4:02 p.m. The typing bubble appeared for an agonizing 10 seconds, then vanished. No reply. By evening, the physical toll of the stress was manifesting. My migraine had settled into a dull, throbbing ache at the base of my skull. I sat in my living room, a modest, comfortable space above the funeral home, and stared at the wall. The silence of the apartment was different from the silence of the work area downstairs. Downstairs was peaceful. Up here, it was lonely. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't Owen. It was a notification from social media. I shouldn't have looked, but I was picking at the scab, desperate for any connection. It was a photo posted by Abigail. The caption read, "Family dinner with the in-laws, so blessed to be joining such a wonderful, classy family. No bad vibes allowed this weekend. Wedding countdown pure joy." The photo showed Owen, Abigail, and her parents. They were at the Gilded Lily, the most expensive steakhouse in the city. Owen looked relaxed, happy. He didn't look like a man missing his sister. He looked like a man relieved to be rid of a burden. "Classy family," I whispered to the empty room. The irony tasted like bile. I zoomed in on the photo. I saw the suit Owen was wearing. It was a custom Armani I had bought him for his first big interview. I saw the watch on his wrist, a tag heuer I had given him for his 25th birthday. I saw the smile that had been straightened by 3 years of orthodontics I had paid for in monthly installments while I was driving a rusted sedan. They saw an undertaker. They saw a grim reaper in a skirt. They didn't see the woman who had washed the chemicals from her hair every night so she could cook dinner for a 12-year-old boy who had just lost his parents. A coldness began to spread through my chest, replacing the heat of the hurt. It was a familiar coldness. It was the professional detachment I used when I had to tell a mother her child wasn't coming home. It was the steel spine that allowed me to walk into a room of weeping people and take charge. I stood up and walked to the small safe I kept in the corner of my bedroom. I spun the dial, the clicks loud in the quiet room. Inside were the important papers, the deeds, the trusts, and the contracts. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside was the contract for the venue. The sprawling, historic vineyard estate that Abigail had insisted was the only place she could possibly get married. My signature was on the bottom line as the guarantor. Underneath that was a bank check, a cashier's check made out to Premier Realty Group. It was for $80,000, the down payment on the Victorian restoration in the historic district, Owen and Abigail's dream home, my wedding gift. I held the check in my hand. It felt heavy. Owen thought he was protecting his image. He thought he was cutting off a bad luck charm. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. When you cut off the hand that feeds you, you usually starve. To understand why this cut so deep, you have to understand the history. I was 22 when our parents died in a pileup on the interstate. Owen was 14. I was fresh out of mortuary school, planning to apprentice under my father for a few years before slowly taking on more responsibility. Instead, I was thrust into the driver's seat of a third-generation business and the role of a single parent overnight. I didn't date, I didn't travel, I didn't have a roaring 20s. My 20s were spent in the prep room, dealing with formaldehyde and grief, and in the kitchen, helping Owen with his algebra. I aged 10 years in too. I took over the family business, revitalized it, and worked 7 days a week to ensure Owen never felt the loss of our parents' income. I wanted him to have everything I didn't. When he said he wanted to be an architect, I didn't blink. I paid for the private tutors. I paid for the summer programs in Italy. I paid for the tuition at the prestigious university that cost more per semester than most people make in a year. I was proud of him. He was my masterpiece. I thought we were a team. Then came Abigail. Owen met her at a gallery opening 2 years ago. She was stunning, I'll give her that. Blonde, polished, with the kind of effortless elegance that comes from never having to work for anything. She described herself as a lifestyle consultant, though I never quite figured out whose life she was consulting on or what qualifications she had other than an Instagram following. From the moment we met, I felt the judgment. "Oh," she had said when Owen introduced me, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she'd smelled something foul. "You're the funeral sister," Owen told me. "That's so. Brave, I could never, it's just so icky." I had laughed it off. "Someone has to do it," ID said. "I suppose," she had replied, turning her back to me to admire a painting. Over the last 2 years, the slights had been constant but subtle. She would suggest I change my clothes before we went out because I looked like a mourner. She would forget to invite me to parties where her friends would be. She made comments about how quaint my apartment was, asking why I didn't live somewhere less haunted. But the real poison was what she poured into Owen's ear. I saw him changing. He became critical of the business. He started making jokes about dead people money. He stopped coming by the funeral home, insisting we meet at neutral locations because the vibe depressed him. I sat at my kitchen table, the documents spread out before me, and realized that Abigail wasn't just a snob. She was a predator. She had identified the source of resources, Owen, and was systematically isolating him from his origin. She wanted the architect husband with the trust fund lifestyle, but she didn't want the undertaker sister who made it all possible. She wanted the fruit, but she wanted to chop down the tree. I remembered a conversation from 3 months ago. We were looking at the venue. "It's perfect," Abigail had squealed, twirling in the ballroom. "It's going to be the event of the season. My parents are inviting the senator. Can you imagine?" "It's very expensive, Abigail," I had said gently, looking at the quote. "It's $50,000 just for the rental." She had looked at me with those ice blue eyes, her smile tight. "Well, Owen said you have it handled. Isn't business booming? People are always dying, right? It's the least you can do for him. He's had such a hard life." A hard life. The boy who drove a BMW to high school. That was the moment I should have seen it coming. She didn't respect the work. She didn't respect me. She only respected the checkbook. I looked down at the documents again. The cashier's check for the house. The contract for the venue. If I wasn't good enough to stand by his side at the altar, then surely my money wasn't good enough to pay for the floor he stood on. I picked up my phone again. No missed calls. No texts. Just the silence of a brother who had chosen a lie over his own blood. I wasn't going to call him again. I wasn't going to beg. I stood up, my migraines suddenly forgotten, replaced by a clarity that was sharp and cold as a scalpel. I walked to the closet and pulled out my suit, not a funeral suit, my power suit. A charcoal gray tailored blazer and pants that screamed authority. I wasn't going to the wedding as a guest. I was going as a creditor, and I was calling in the debt. The morning sun hit my living room floor with a cheerfulness that felt offensive. I hadn't slept. I had spent the night sitting in that chair, the leather warming beneath me, staring at the envelope. By 8:00 a.m., the numbness had receded, replaced by a cold, humming engine of determination. I wasn't a victim. I was a businesswoman. I dealt with the business of death every day, Surely I could handle the death of a relationship. I didn't go downstairs to the office. Instead, I set up a command center at my kitchen table. My first call wasn't to Owen. It was to Mr. Henderson, the owner of the Vineyard Estate, the venue for the wedding. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with the syrupy charm reserved for high-paying clients. "Camilla, so good to hear from you. We are all set for the big weekend. The florists are arriving at noon. It's going to be spectacular." "Good morning, Robert," I said. My voice was steady, void of any inflection. "I'm calling regarding the contract, specifically the guarantor clause." There was a pause, the shuffling of papers on the other end. "The guarantor clause? Is there a problem with the payment schedule? Because the final installment is due upon." "I'm withdrawing my financial backing, Robert," I interrupted. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. "Effective immediately. I am invoking the cancellation clause for the deposit I personally placed. I want the card on file removed, and I want a written confirmation sent to my email within the hour." Silence stretched out, thick and heavy. "Camilla," Robert stammered, his charm evaporati. You can't just withdraw. The wedding is in 48 hours. The vendors are booked. The catering has been purchased. If you pull the funding now, the contract is voided. Unless Owen or the bride's family can wire the full balance, which is roughly $45,000, by close of business today, we have to lock the doors. "I understand the terms, Robert," I said, taking a sip of cold coffee. "Abigail's family is quite wealthy, from what I hear. Old money, they call it. I'm sure a mere $45,000 is pocket change for them. They certainly wouldn't want an undertaker footing the bill for their daughter's perfect day, would they?" I see," Robert said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He sensed the blood in the water. "I will draft the invoice and send it to Owen immediately." "Do that," I said. "And Robert, cancel the fireworks package. That was a personal gift from me. I'll be taking the refund on that directly." I hung up, my hand didn't shake. Next was the real estate agent, Sarah. This one was harder. Sarah was a friend. She knew how much I wanted this house for Owen. "Hey, Cam," she answered cheerfully. "Excited for the closing on Monday, I got the keys ready. It's going to be such a surprise." "Sarah," I said, closing my eyes for a brief second to steady myself. "We're not closing." "What, did the inspection find something? The roof?" "No, the roof is fine. The foundation is the problem," I said. "I'm pulling the offer. I'm shredding the cashier's check." "Camilla," she gasped. "You're in breach if you walk away now. You'll lose the earnest money. That's $5,000 gone." "It's a small price to pay," I replied, looking at the photo of Owen and me on the fridge. "Trust me, it's cheaper than the alternative. Tell the sellers I'm out, and tell them I'm sorry." I hung up. 2 pillars of Owen's future crumbled in 10 minutes. But I wasn't done. The bad vibes comment from Abigail's post stuck in my throat. Classy family. I opened my laptop and logged into the subscription database I used for background checks on potential employees. It was a standard industry tool, usually used to make sure a new driver didn't have a DUI, but it could find financial records if you knew where to look. I typed in Abigail Sterling. Nothing much, just a lot of credit card inquiries. Then I typed in her father's name, Richard Sterling. The screen loaded, and a waterfall of red text appeared. Liens, 3 of them. A pending foreclosure on a property in Connecticut. A bankruptcy filing from 4 years ago that had been dismissed but left a mark. And a lawsuit from a contractor for unpaid renovations. I sat back, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark satisfaction growing in my chest. They weren't rich. They were drowning. They were leveraged to the hilt, likely shuffling debt from one card to another to maintain the facade of high society. "Oh, Owen," I whispered, "you didn't just marry a snob, you're marrying a leech." I needed more. I needed concrete proof. I picked up the phone again and dialed Marcus, a private investigator I had used once when a competitor tried to slander the funeral home. "Marcus," I said when he answered, "I have a rush job. I need the full financial history on a Richard and Linda Sterling. I need to know exactly how broke they are, and I need it by tonight. Tonight, Marcus laughed. That's going to cost you double. I'll pay triple, I said. Just get me the paper trail. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Gilded Lily, the same steakhouse from the Instagram photo. It was fitting. They wanted to return to the scene of the crime. I arrived at 7:00 p.m. sharp. I wasn't wearing black. I wore a crimson dress that fit like armor, paired with heels that clicked sharply against the pavement. I didn't have an invitation, but the hostess knew me. I had arranged funerals for half the town's elite families. She looked at me, confused. Ms. Velez, I don't see you on the list for the Sterling Velez party. It was a last-minute addition, reckless oversight. I lied smoothly, sliding a $100 bill across the podium. I just need to drop off a gift. She hesitated, then nodded. They're in the private room in the back. I walked through the main dining room. The smell of searing steak and expensive red wine filled the air. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage, but my face was a mask of stone. I reached the double doors of the private room and didn't bother knocking. I pushed them open. The chatter inside died instantly. There were about 20 people, Abigail's parents, a few bridesmaids, and at the head of the table, Owen and Abigail. Owen had a glass of champagne halfway to his mouth. When he saw me, he froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like one of my clients. Abigail was the first to react. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What are you doing here?" Our voice wasn't the sweet, whispery tone she used on social media. It was shrill. "Owen told you, you aren't welcome." "Hello, Abigail. Hello, Owen," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I walked toward the head table. The guests watched, forks hovering halfway to their mouths. "Camilla, please," Owen stammered, standing up. He looked terrified. He glanced at Abigail's father, a heavy-set man with a red face who was glaring at me. "We can talk about this later. Please don't make a scene." "I'm not here to make a scene, Owen," I said, stopping 3 feet from them. "I'm here to give you your wedding gift early. Since I won't be attending the ceremony due to my embarrassing profession, I thought it was only right to deliver this in person." I reached into my purse and pulled out the thick envelope. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the floral centerpiece. "What is this?" Abigail snapped, reaching for it. "It's for Owen," I said sharply. Owen reached out, his hand trembling. He opened the flap. He pulled out the first paper, the cancellation confirmation from the Vineyard estate. "I don't understand," Owen whispered, scanning the document. "Cancellation due to withdrawal of funds." "Read the next one," I said. He pulled out the copy of the cashier's check for the house, ripped in half and taped to a sheet of paper with the words offer rescinded stamped across it. You canceled the house?" Owen looked up at me, his eyes wide with horror. "Camilla, this is $80,000. This is our home." "It was a home I was buying for you," I corrected him. "Using the money I earned as an undertaker. But since that money is too dirty for your in-laws to be associated with, I figured I should spare you the humiliation of living in a house paid for by death." The room was dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. Abigail's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She snatched the papers from Owen's hand. "You be *TCH, she screamed. The word hung in the air, ugly and raw. "You did this on purpose. You're trying to ruin my wedding because you're jealous. You're a lonely, miserable hag who plays with dead bodies and you want everyone else to be miserable too." "Abigail," Owen said, shocked. "Shut up, Owen," she yelled at him, turning on her fiance. "Fix this, make her pay it, Daddy tell her." Richard Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket, trying to look imposing. "Now see here, young lady, we had an agreement. The groom's family pays for the venue. This is a breach of contract." I turned my gaze to Richard. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Actually, Richard, the contract was with me, not Owen. Owen doesn't have $50,000. Owen has a student loan debt that I've been paying, and as for agreements, I don't recall making one with you. You are ruining the most important day of my daughter's life, Richard blustered. I will sue you. With what money? I asked quietly. Richard froze, his eyes darted side to side. Get out, Abigail shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at the door. Get out of here, I never want to see you again. And Owen, if you don't fix this, there is no wedding. I looked at Owen. He was slumped in his chair, looking at the shredded check like it was a corpse. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell Abigail to stop screaming. He just looked defeated. I'm leaving, I said calmly. Enjoy the dinner. I hope you can cover the bill. I'm certainly not picking up the tab for this one. I turned and walked out. My back was straight. But as soon as the double doors closed behind me, my knees buckled. I had to lean against the corridor wall to keep from sliding to the floor. I had dropped the bomb. The explosion was magnificent. But I was still standing in the blast radius. I expected Owen to come running after me. I expected him to burst through those doors, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. I waited in the parking lot for 10 minutes. He didn't come. Instead, my phone blew up with texts from him an hour later. Owen, how could you do that? You humiliated Abigail. She's hysterical. Owen, her dad is talking about legal action. You have to fix this, Cammy. Please, put the deposit back. We can work this out. Owen, she says if you pay the venue, you can come to the ceremony. She's willing to compromise. I stared at the screen, disbelief warring with rage. Compromise? She was willing to allow me to pay $50,000 for the privilege of standing in the back of a room where I wasn't wanted. The manipulation was masterclass. She had twisted the narrative so quickly. I was the villain, the unstable sister, and the only way to redemption was to open my checkbook again. And Owen, my sweet, brilliant, stupid brother, he was buying it. He was terrified of losing her. He was terrified of the confrontation. He was trying to keep the peace by sacker. Ifacing me. I drove back to the funeral home. The night air was cool. I went straight to my office. Marcus had emailed the file. I sat down and opened the PDF. It was worse than I thought. Richard Sterling wasn't just broke, he was a fraudster. The family money was gone a generation ago. Richard had been living off loans, second mortgages, and what looked like a Ponzi scheme involving investment opportunities for his country club friends. But the kicker was Abigail. Page 12 of the report showed her credit card statements. She had maxed out 3 cards in the last month alone. The charges? Bridal boutiques, jewelers, travel agents. But there was one charge that stood out. A payment of $5,000 to a company called Prestige Actors Guild. I frowned, Actors Guild. I Googled the company. It was a service that provided atmosphere actors for events, fake guests, fake friends. I scrolled further down Marcus's report. There were emails. Marcus was thorough. He had evidently accessed a shared cloud drive Richard had unsecured. I found an email from Abigail to her mother, Linda. Subject, the wedding budget date, 2 weeks ago. Mom, don't worry about the venue. Owen's sister is paying. She's obsessed with him, she'll pay for anything. Once we're married and I'm on the deed for the house she's buying, we can flip it within a year. That should cover Dad's legal fees and get us out of the hole. Just be nice to the morbid sister for 1 more month. After the wedding, we cut her off for good. She's embarrassing. I read it 3 times. The words swam before my eyes. It wasn't just about snobbery, it was a heist. They were marrying Owen to liquidate the assets I gave him. They were going to take the house, my parents' legacy money, sell it, and use it to bail out their own failures. And Owen was the unsuspecting mule carrying the gold. My phone rang. It was Owen again. Cammy, he said when I answered. He sounded exhausted. Please, Abigail is willing to forgive you. Just transfer the money back. We can forget this happened. She's willing to forgive me? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Owen, listen to me very carefully. I am sending you a file right now. I want you to open it. I want you to read the email on page 14. I don't want to read a file, Cammy. I want my wedding back. There is no wedding, Owen, I shouted, finally losing my composure. There is no marriage. You are a mark. You are a payday. Open the damn file. You're crazy, he said. You've lost your mind. Open it, I commanded. Or I swear on Mom and Dad's graves, I will post it on Facebook and tag every single one of Abigail's high society friends. I will expose them to the entire city. The silence on the line was heavy. Fine, he snapped. I'm opening it. I waited. I heard the click of a mouse. I heard his breath hitch. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. This can't be real, he whispered. His voice was trembling. She said they were buying us a vacation home in Aspen, she said. Look at the date, Owen, I said. Look at what she calls me. Look at the plan for the house. Flip it within a year, he read, his voice breaking. Cut her off for good. She doesn't love you, Owen, I said, tears finally streaming down my face. She loves the house I was buying you. She loves the tuition I paid. She loves the safety net I built. She's a grifter, and her parents are broke. I have to go, Owen said. He sounded like he was going to be sick. Owen, wait. The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness of the office. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. I had saved him. I knew I had. But I also knew that in saving him, I had probably broken his heart into a million unfixable pieces. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't Owen, it was Abigail. Abigail, you think you're so smart? You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Owen doesn't believe your photoshopped lies. He's with me, and we're coming to the funeral home. Now. I stared at the text. She was doubling down. She was cornered, desperate, and she was coming to my turf. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face. I walked out of the office and into the viewing room. I turned on the lights. Come on then, I said to the empty room. Let's finish this. The heavy oak doors of the funeral home burst open 30 minutes later. It was nearly midnight, but the foyer lights were blazing. Abigail strode in first, her face a mask of furious determination, her heels clacking violently on the marble floor. Behind her, Owen walked like a man marching to the gallows, shoulders slumped, eyes red-rimmed, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Behind him trailed Richard and Linda Sterling, looking less like high society elites and more like cornered animals. Where are you? Abigail shrieked, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Show yourself, you jealous witch. I stepped out from the viewing parlor. I stood in the center of the hallway, flanked by 2 large floral arrangements from the day's service. The setting was grim, solemn, and undeniably mine. This was my kingdom. I'm right here, Abigail, I said calmly. She marched up to me, stopping inches from my face. You faked those emails, you hacked my account. That is a felony. I will have you arrested. It's not hacking if your father leaves his password as password 123 on a public cloud server, I replied, not backing down. I looked past her to Owen. Owen, did you read the rest? Owen looked up. His eyes were swimming with confusion and pain. She says you made it up, Cammy. She says you're trying to frame them. Of course I am. Abigail spun around to face him, grabbing his lapels. Owen, look at me. Your sister has always hated me. She's jealous of us. She's jealous of my family. She made up those lies to stop the wedding because she can't stand to see you happy. And the liens? I asked, raising my voice. The bankruptcy, the $5,000 to Prestige Actors Guild. Did I fake the public court records too? Lies, Richard Sterling bellowed, stepping forward. My finances are impeccable. This is slander. Is it? I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I have the foreclosure notice for your Connecticut house right here, Richard. Dated 3 days ago. You have 30 days to vacate. Richard's face went gray. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Abigail turned back to me, her eyes wild. I don't care about your papers. Owen loves me. We're getting married, and you're going to pay for it, or so help me God, I will ruin this business. I will tell everyone you desecrate the bodies. I will destroy you." The threat hung in the air, vile and desperate. Owen stared at her. It was the first time I had ever seen him look at her without adoration. He looked at her hands gripping his jacket. He looked at her parents, who were now huddled together, whispering frantically. "Abigail," Owen said, his voice cracking, "did you write the email?" "It doesn't matter," she screamed. "She's manipulating you." "Did you write it?" Owen's voice rose, stronger this time. He pulled her hands off his jacket. Abigail froze. She looked at Owen, then at me. She saw her escape route closing. She saw the house, the money, the bailout vanishing. "I did it for us," she finally yelled, throwing her hands up. "Yes, okay, we needed the money, my parents needed help. And you have that sister who throws cash around like it's nothing. Why shouldn't we use it? You didn't earn it. She's just an undertaker. It's blood money anyway." The silence that followed was absolute. Owen took a step back. He looked at Abigail as if she were a stranger. "It's not blood money," Owen said quietly. "It's the money that put food on my table when our parents died. It's the money that paid for my degree. It's the money that made me who I am." He turned to me. Tears were running down his face. "Cammy worked 18-hour days for this money. She sacrificed her entire 20s for me." He looked back at Abigail. The love in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that looked exactly like mine. "Get out," Owen said. "What?" Abigail gasped. "Get out," Owen repeated louder. "The wedding is off. We're done. Take your parents and get out of my sister's funeral home." "You can't do this," Abigail shrieked, grabbing his arm. "The guests, the venue, my reputation." "Your reputation is a lie," Owen said, shaking her off. "And if you don't leave right now, Cammy is going to call the police. And she'll show them the fraud evidence too." Abigail looked at him, then at her parents. She let out a scream of pure frustration, a primal sound of a child denied a toy. "You're a loser, Owen. You're nothing without her checkbook. I hope you rot in this creepy place." She spun on her heel and stormed out. Richard and Linda scurried after her, not daring to make eye contact. The heavy doors slammed shut, leaving the foyer silent once again. Owen stood there for a long time, staring at the doors. Then, slowly, he crumbled. He sank to the marble floor, put his head in his hands, and began to sob. It wasn't the polite crying of a movie. It was the ugly, heaving sobs of a man whose world had just imploded. I walked over and sat down beside him. I didn't say anything. I just put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close, just like I used to when he was 14 and woke up from a nightmare about the accident. We sat there on the floor of the funeral home for an hour. "I'm so sorry, Cammy," he choked out eventually. "I'm so stupid, I'm so sorry." "You're not stupid," I whispered, resting my head on his shoulder. "You were in love, and she was a professional." "I told you not to come," he said, shaking his head. "I treated you like you were nothing." "You were scared," I said, "and now you know." The aftermath was messy, as these things always are. The cancellation of the wedding was the talk of the town for weeks. Abigail tried to spin a story on social media about me being an evil sister-in-law from hell, but I quietly released the foreclosure documents and the email, redacted, mostly to a few key gossip circles. The truth spreads faster than lies when it's that juicy. The Sterlings quietly moved out of state a month later, fleeing their creditors. Owen moved in with me for a while. He needed time to heal, to deprogram himself from 2 years of manipulation. We spent long nights talking, drinking cheap wine, and rebuilding the bridge between us. I didn't buy the house for him, not yet. We agreed he needed to stand on his own 2 feet for a bit. He took a job at a firm in the city, a job he got on his own merit, not Abigail's connections. He started paying his own rent. 6 months later, on a Tuesday, Owen walked into the prep room while I was working. He was holding a small box. "I know it's not much," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a simple silver charm bracelet. The charm was a tiny, detailed house. "I'm saving up," he said, smiling, a real smile this time. "I'm going to buy my own house one day, And when I do, I want you to have the spare key, because you're always welcome. Anywhere I am, you're welcome. I hugged him, the scent of antiseptic and lilies between us, but this time he didn't pull away. Thanks, Undertaker, he teased, using the old nickname, but the sting was gone. You're welcome, Architect, I replied. I went back to work. The dead needed tending to. But for the first time in a long time, the living felt pretty good too.